Today we're gonna fire up the wood burning cook stove. We've got plenty of wood and we've got all day. So the kids and I are going to make a slow pioneer pumpkin pie. It's a recipe from a really old cookbook. So hopefully it's gonna be a good day. So we only have one episode left in our renovation series, the 1889 project, where we will be laying stone steps as the final bit of architecture for this old homestead house. That drops next weekend. Today, we thought you might like a sneak peek of our new Pioneer Skills series. This series of episodes is where we'll cook, explore tools and methods, and truly experience the slow day-to-day of life on a frontier cabin in Montana, circa the late 1800s. In the spirit of crisp fall weather outside our door, today is about spending all day on the homestead, celebrating the humble pumpkin. For this recipe, we're starting with a pumpkin from the fields. I actually think we could do this with a bigger tool. I think this is the way to do it. Outside. Go grab my big pot. This recipe calls for cutting up the pumpkin into cubes after removing the insides and the skin. Okay, so we cut out the inside, cut off the peel, the rind on the outside, and then I've cubed it into a bunch of small pieces. And then basically I'm gonna add a little bit of water, and then I'm going to take that and put it onto the cook stove. We're gonna just let this stew down for, they recommend all day. So I've got these two munchkins here. I'm gonna cook them some food on the cook stove while this is going on. And we will see how this ends up looking. Be careful not to slip, okay?
It's kind of hard to do. As long as it takes. It's kind of getting easier.
So pumpkin is one of those foods that we really only think of eating around this time of year, which is Halloween. But to pioneers on the frontier and on the prairie, this was a staple food in their diet. Early pioneers in America, early colonists, learned really fast that pumpkins were the difference between starvation and survival out here in America. Pumpkins were poo-pooed in England and other places like that as a somewhat savage food. But here in America, we like our pumpkins. And they've always been a food that, especially in the fall, can produce a lot for big family meals. This will be your first pumpkin pie.
And pumpkin stew.
And pumpkin stew. Put a little bit of oil in. And then let's get this over the hottest part of the stove. The other thing on a stove like this, the way you control the heat is by the kind of wood you put in and how much of it. You move your pans around on top of the cook stove rather than moving the heat on the cook stove. So I'm gonna go over to this far left side, right over the wood box, and I'm gonna put our hot skillets on it. Gourmet chef on that. All right, I'm gonna move that to a less hot part of the stove. Okay, I am finally ready for a cup of tea. This is the third attempt to try to make it, and I keep getting distracted. I've got some Irish tea we can make. The water's ready.
Yeah. Yummy.
One, two, the best food.
Okay.
You have to warm your plates. And in true fashion, 5 more things came up, and by the time I get to drink this tea, it's cold. It's just that kind of day. At least we have hot dogs that are hot, and we get to sit down at the table and eat together. So, it's a win. This pumpkin is continuing to just slowly break down in the pot. Robbie's away for the night looking at a piece of forestry equipment that we might feature on an upcoming episode for some logging on the ranch. That means it's just me and the kids to camp out tonight.
Oh, good. I get to be him while I'm gone, so I get to be the manager. Well, you don't have to call me boss.
Assistant to the regional manager.
And I'm not the boss. Good job, Mom. That part is looking good. I'm so tired. Then walk.
That pumpkin is cooking up nicely. It's stewing away in the big cast iron pot. We're gonna go do a good hike. Whew. And even though the air is pretty crisp and cold, it feels good to get outside. It's a luxury that winter's gonna take away from us pretty soon.
Mommy, I need to know
Okay, I'm gonna slide this over to the hottest part of the fire, and I'm gonna cook it 10 more minutes. Basically trying to drive off any moisture and liquid still left in it so that we can thicken up this pumpkin puree. Of course, I haven't done anything else to it. I haven't run it through a food mill or a blender or anything like that. Partly because that's not a tool they would have had back in the day, and partly because I have to do the dishes out here. And when you're hauling in your water and you're heating it on the wood cook stove, anything more, any extra tools you have to clean, you really ask yourself if it's worth it. So the more I can do with less tools, that's gonna be my plan. So 10 more minutes of really driving the moisture off, and we're gonna call this pumpkin done. I think inevitably there's gonna be some lumps, and there's gonna be a few little bits of pumpkin skin. We'll have this pumpkin stewed as a vegetable with our dinner, and then we will bake it with eggs and spices into a pie crust for dessert. Always gotta see if anybody's in it, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that smells glorious.
Why?
Oh. But just in case I'm making it look too fun, spending all day in a one-room cabin has its ups and downs. So apologize now, both of you.
I'm so sorry.
Getting on each other's nerves aside, we really did have fun cooking this old recipe.
Good job,
So this recipe comes out of a Laura Ingalls Wilder story, and it was one we were excited to try to recreate. But let's jump into the pie, because although it took all day long and well into the night, we did manage to make the pumpkin pie, and it proved to be a bit of an adventure. Like any household, there was dinner to cook first, steak on the cook stove, and once that was done, the sun had gone down, which in a normal house doesn't really make that much difference, but out on the prairie with candlelight and oil lamps, that changes everything. But we decided to go for it and to fire up the oven and see if we could get this to cook. Rub it together with my fingertips.
Okay.
That should be the trick to a good pie. Just a little bit of butter is gonna add some great flavor. I'll use what we've got. Mash in lard and the butter. Push just a little bit of sugar. Eventually, like all good things, just resort to your hands. You can get a better feel for where the dough's at. We're just trying to break up any of these lumps so that we get tiny pieces and nothing that big. I'm gonna let that dough just rest in the cold outside on the porch and see if it can hydrate a little bit. And while that dough is out there chilling, we are going to make the pumpkin filling. And then we have a super cool tool. This is a birch whisk. So this is something people could have made or easily acquired out on the frontier. This is that pumpkin we spent all day on. sugar.
Salt. That will make it way better.
Now what it needs is spices. This is our prized spice box, just like the pioneers would have felt. Everything in here is somewhat expensive. So we have cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger. Okay. And then we'll roll out this dough and we've got it. It's ready to fill and go in the oven. Rustic pumpkin pie. Woo! Nice and hot. You. Hi, nutmegs. Okay, it's late at night and we just pulled the pumpkin pie out of the oven. And of course, I burnt it. This oven is very hard to control the temperature. So I've got a lot to learn. But I guess that's gonna be a fun challenge for us. Everybody's tired, everybody's ready for bed. We'll take stock of this pie in the morning and see just how rough it is. Okay, let's talk about this pie. So we pulled this pie out of the oven late last night and the kids and I spent the night out at Uncle Dan's. And when we woke up in the morning to frost covering everything, the kids insisted that we light the cook stove and then we cut into this pumpkin pie. And even though it got a little black around the edges, that oven is tricky to control. This pie was delicious. It was the perfect breakfast. It's rustic. You can tell it's got chunks of pumpkin still in it. It is not a perfectly smooth puree like it really ought to be, but for a rustic frontier pie, I don't think you can beat this. Especially on a very cold, frosty morning with a cup of hot chocolate and a slice of pumpkin pie. Even George thought this was delicious. So now that we're back home in a cozy house, let's cut one more piece. What I thought was going to be ruined from a hot oven ended up working out just fine. So you can see in these old ovens, the top of the oven gets really hot. Even with the oven working as it should now, that top just instantly burned. So let's just pretend that didn't happen. But if you check at the bottom's cooked really nicely. It's flaky, it's tender. You can see there's chunks of pumpkin and a really good caramelized top. There's so much ginger in this. The ginger and the nutmeg are just what make a pumpkin pie special. Cheers, everybody. It does make for some interesting reflections on history and how much doing basic things we take for granted. Back in the day, just cooking a meal and knowing how to use your tools was not simple and took a great deal of knowledge. So, thanks for coming along. Stir, please.